That's like you take another class that I teach, like world history or something like that. So these are the last notes for government class. Tomorrow, I'm gonna just send out a little something on voting and budgeting and stuff like that. And I'll send out the send the review. And then Monday will be your Illinois Constitution time. All right. And then after that, it's make up May. You can make up work. So you can pass. All right. So what I want to do is I want to talk about basically the executive and judicial branches here of the Illinois state government. Yesterday I was talking about like kind of like the structure of the Illinois Constitution. Talked about the legislative branch. And I failed to mention. I looked on there. There are some questions on like, and I put it in today. Like who are the current like office holders and certain things. So yesterday I was telling you about our kind of representative in this area, which would be Katie Stewart. I think that might be a question on the test. But again, you're at home, and if you're not quite sure on a answer, you may there's a kind of handy thing called Google. You may want to Google it. It's all good. All right. So there's going to be some of that stuff. So today I'll kind of talk about the various kind of like roles, duties, the various kind of officials that make up the kind of parts of the executive and judicial branch. All right. Oh, cool. It keeps on going on. So like with the, and again, yesterday I was telling you like kind of the Illinois Constitution, a little slightly different than, I love this. I love it. I'm going to hold it. There it is. All right, so the Illinois Constitution, like I said, is a little structured a little bit differently. Both the U.S. and Illinois Constitution have preambles and kind of introductions. The thing about the Illinois one, there's no technically as we call them amendments. They do change over time, though. There's that concept of kind of changing the Constitution. Because remember, like there's a question on the test. This is the Illinois' 4th Constitution. All right, and also, like I forgot to kind of mention there, every 20 years there's kind of a vote, a referendum placed in where the citizens of Illinois can ask for a convention to basically revisit the Constitution and make their necessary changes and stuff like that. But it hasn't been passed since the last time in 1970. So the current one that we're working with is basically went into effect in 1970. All right, so it's our 4th one. So we have sections in these articles instead of amendments technically. All right, so it's all basically what we call semantics, if you will. All right, and so with the executive branch is outlined, and the powers and duties and all that functions are outlined in Article 5. All right, and so again, like we talked about in the kind of federal system, the executive branch, their job, their duty, their main function when it comes to laws is to enforce or enact laws. All right, the head executive of the state government, every state government, is the governor. All right. So the governor is like the president of the state, if you will. Okay, so again, that's kind of like every kind of state has it. And then we'll talk about the various kind of offices that are there to kind of help aid the governor, if you will. So you're also, I think there's a question on the test. You have to know who the current governor of Illinois is, and that is somebody that you should be at least familiar with. He's somewhat of a divisive character. This is J.B. Pritzker. He's the current governor of Illinois. He's the 43rd governor of Illinois. He was elected in 2018. He defeated Bruce Rauner. He's a Democrat. He's from Chicago. His family basically made their kind of fortune in the hospitality business. His family owns Hyatt. If you've ever seen those Hyatt hotels, that's his there. So I know, like with this last issue that we had with the COVID-19 and the shutdowns and stuff, certain things. There's not a lot of people there. There's some people that are, there's not a lot of people that are sitting on the fence, so to speak. People that are supporters are, they're not a big fan. All right. So there's questions, like I said, questions on the test on the Illinois State Constitution, which have current office holders. So he's one of them. So make sure you know that. All right. There's J.B. Pritzker. Okay. And then what's qualifications to be governor? And these are the same qualifications for the other main offices here. Your age requirement, you got to be at least 25 years old. All right. So remember, members of the General Assembly, what we call the Illinois House and Senate, they have to be 21. Governor, you have to be 25. All right. You have to be a resident of the state for 3 years preceding, right before the election. You got to be at least there. All right. There are people that kind of move into states that they aren't from. All right. that are going to, like, in Massachusetts, Mitt Romney was initially from Utah, he moved to Massachusetts. Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California. He was obviously from another place in Austria. And you got to be a U.S. citizen. All right, so that's pretty much it. All right, those are pretty kind of simple qualifications. You don't have any other experience. You don't have to be an attorney, all this other stuff. All right, so easy. So I think there's a question on the test about the age, particularly. All right, just kind of one of those things you just kind of remember. The term for the office of governor, like with the president, is 4 years, right? But unlike the president, there are no term limits, right? Illinois does not have term limits, so governors can serve multiple terms. It's generally, though, 2 terms, usually, right? There are some governors that serve for 3 terms, like maybe Jim Edgar may have served, was the last one to serve for 3 terms, right? So that's easy to remember. 4 years for president, 4 years for governor. All right, that question comes up on the top. And then the duties. There's kind of a lot of duties that obviously, as the executive, kind of enforce to making sure the laws of Illinois that are passed by the General Assembly are enforced. One of the things is the governor is commander-in-chief of the state militia, much like kind of how the president's commander-in-chief of the armed forces here, except in cases of national emergency. All right, and that is when the president basically kind of takes over the Illinois National Guard. Right. So that's where we see a similarity. Also, too, governor may grant pardons. All right, remember what pardons are? You basically kind of just excuse the the sentence there. Commutations, where you lower the sentence, and then reprieves. All right. So those are all things that, again, they're similar when we find the president. Again, signing bills into law is a big thing. That would obviously what the governor does. All right. And with that, the governor has certain, if the governor does not necessarily like a bill, and remember, when the General Assembly passes a bill, it has to reach the desk of the governor within 30 days while they're in session. All right. If it does not, then that bill kind of dies. All right. And so what we have is with the veto power for the governor, it's a little different than the president. The president of the United States is kind of limited on their types of kind of things that they can do with their veto. All right. It's either all or nothing. Within Illinois, the governor has 3 types of vetoes. It's just a regular veto, you just basically reject the whole bill, send it back to where it originates. So remember, it has to pass by kind of like a 3/5 majority in both houses of the General Assembly. And what they call reduction veto. This is for appropriation bills. Appropriation bills are all bills that deal with basically raising taxes or revenue, stuff like that. All right, but allocation of money, state money. And then a mandatory veto, which is something like I talked about, is what they call a line item veto. In that, basically, the governor can get a whole bill and may not like a couple provisions in that bill and can basically kind of cross those out. So I like this part of most of the bill, but I don't like this part and this part. Then makes recommendations. Those have to go back to the House where it originated, and they have to re-vote on that. And they have to have a 2/3 majority that has to kind of vote on that. So the governor's given a little bit more leeway when it comes to certain bills and that. And more bills tend to get passed on the state level than we tend to see on the federal level. All right. For various reasons. There's no filibuster concept within the kind of the state Senate here. We don't have any of that here. That's just kind of the U.S. Senate. All right. Now, one thing I failed to mention when we were talking about the General Assembly, one of the jobs of the General Assembly, there is within the kind of the Article 2, that whole idea of basically kind of like powers of government, that concept of checks and balances and separation of powers. With an impeachment, it's very similar to how on the federal level is put in there. House of Representatives brings impeachment charges against the governor or a judge, any type of basically executive or judicial official within the state government. All right, that's just simple majority. And remember, there's 118 members of the Illinois House of Representatives, and then the Senate acts as a jury. You have to have a 2/3 vote of all senators for conviction, same kind of what we have here in the federal system. So there's 59 senators, so you got to get a good number of them to convict. Right. The only governor of Illinois that's been impeached, brought charges, found guilty, and then removed from office was recently. That was Rod Blagojevich. Blagojevich was under federal investigation there was like they attacked his phone. He was apparently trying to sell the Senate seat that Barack Obama had vacated after being elected president. All right, they had him on there. But we've had, 4 governors in the state of Illinois that have gone to prison. All right, we have the most former governors of any state that people have gone to prison. That's kind of like one of our claims of fame, if you will. But I failed to mention this yesterday within the notes about General Assembly. I just want to kind of throw it in there. And then other kind of offices of the executive branch. All right, right below the governor, and this is like kind of order of succession. So like when Barack Blagojevich was impeached, the lieutenant governor Pat Quinn became governor. All right, so lieutenant governor, second in command, kind of like the vice president to a certain extent. All right. Up until 1973, the lieutenant governor served as the presiding officer or president of the Senate. After 73, there was a vote that was basically kind of picked and chosen by the majority party. And the current lieutenant governor is Juliana Stratton. She's from the Chicago area. She was elected in 2018 when J.B. Pritzker was elected. In Illinois, what you have is the lieutenant governor and governor basically run together like president and vice president. In other states, though, you have them on separate ballots. So you can have what we call basically a split government, where you could have let's say, a Democratic governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, and vice versa. All right. Illinois is not kind of structured like that. All right. So there's questions on who's the current, lieutenant governor. All right. Just have to remember Juliana Stratton. So there's Juliana. And then Attorney General is next in line in the order of succession there. The Attorney General is essentially the legal officer of the state of Illinois, dealing with any type of kind of legal matters. Represents Illinois in cases of kind of lawsuits and bringing cases against things like people kind of violating certain regulations and Illinois state law. The current Attorney General is a guy also from the Chicago area, Kwame Raoul. Kwame Raoul served in I believe in the Illinois Senate for a long period of time. He was also elected in 2018. All right. You guys got this? I'm going to try to keep it moving. So there's Kwame Raoul. All right. And then the Secretary of State, which almost everybody knows who the Secretary of State is. All right. Not just because the guy's been here since 1999, but a lot of you guys are going through driver's ed, right? A lot of you guys are sophomores, correct? Yeah. So a lot of you guys are going through driver's ed. So the Secretary of State maintains the official records, all right? And the big thing is kind of overseeing DMVs, all right? The driver motor vehicle. So with that, they keep the Great Seal. They're made, and so anything this Great Seal kind of is an official document that represents kind of Illinois. The Secretary of State's office maintains that. The current Secretary of State is a guy that's been in the gig since 1999, one of the longest serving Secretary of States in the country, and that's Jesse White. So everybody tends to know because when you get your license, there's Jesse White's name on there, basically stating that you are officially kind of licensed as a driver in the state of Illinois. And thanks to the whole full faith and credit clause, you can drive over to St. Louis and stuff like that, and Missouri still recognizes your legitimacy of your kind of driver's license. All right. So there's Jesse, and then there's the state seal. So anything that's kind of associated with the kind of the state of Illinois as an official document, Secretary of State kind of maintains that. And then a office that there's really no real comparison in the kind of like maybe in the federal level to a certain extent, but a lot of states have what they call a comptroller. They're kind of like almost like the state's accountant to a certain extent. They maintain kind of the official accounts, kind of make sure that certain finances that are kind of allocated and kind of taken out for that, make sure payments kind of, and so they work usually kind of in tandem with the treasurer of the state. The current comptroller is Susanna Mendoza, right? And so this, like I said, this is one that doesn't always get a whole lot of press and information, but this is definitely an important position here, particularly in a state like Illinois, where finances at times are somewhat kind of suspect and kind of questionable all the time. The comptroller plays a real important position here, all right? So there's Susanna Mendoza, right? For the most part, kind of like the Illinois, kind of like the kind of executive offices there are pretty diverse, compared to like Missouri or kind of some other states, all right? And then the treasurer, the last one there, is responsible for kind of safekeeping of kind of investments of what they call monies, just any type of money, securities, which would be like bonds and stuff like that, and then deposit for disbursement upon the order of the comptroller. All right, so like I said, the comptroller and treasurer a lot of times work in tandem here. The current treasurer is a guy named Mike Burks, who is, I think, was elected in like 2014, also a Democrat. So Illinois is currently kind of like a state that we have a kind of Democratic majority in the General Assembly, and we have a Democratic majority in the offices of the executive. But like treasurer, comptroller, secretary of state, those are all like kind of elected positions, all right, separate from the kind of governor and lieutenant, so governor. So they could be like kind of a split government. And also the requirements are the same as governor, right? Because at any point during the kind of a certain kind of situation, they could, through the order of succession, they could be that. So like I said, on the test, there's some few questions about current office holders. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that at least. All right. And then moving on to there's Mike. All right, what's up, Mike? Moving on to judicial branch. Most of the kind of the judicial branch's powers and duties and all that is laid out in Article 6 of the Illinois State Constitution. And like with the federal kind of court system there, the judicial branch's main job is to interpret, determine if laws that are within the are in the framework of the Illinois State Constitution. Also, the idea of administering justice. This is kind of composed in the justice kind of administration is composed in a system of courts. Like in the federal system, we generally have 3 levels of court systems within the Illinois State kind of judicial system there. So at the top, like the kind of the most common court, kind of the largest number of courts are what we call circuit courts. All right, so like Edwardsville, you see it like circuit court there in Edwardsville. Belleville's got a circuit court. Usually those are in kind of like county seats, right? These are general trial courts, the most common courts that we find in Illinois. Now, unlike in the federal system where judges are appointed by the executive branch, most of these judges in the judicial branch in Illinois are elected. All right, so circuit judges are elected for a 6-year term. There's no term limits necessarily. All right. A lot of times what they'll do is a lot of times with the election, they're not necessarily running against a particular judge. Maybe sometimes that is the case, but sometimes they also have like basically a referendum. All right. Basically, would you retain this judge or not? All right. So this is the most common one. And then below that are the appellate courts. They hear the appeal of district court. If you don't like the kind of result that you got from that district court, you have the right to appeal it. Now, within the kind of court system in Illinois, we have 5 appellate districts. All right. And so what you see is like basically these serve for a 10-year term. Most of them are elected, but some are appointed. They're a 10-year term. There's 52 appellate court judges. What you have is generally basically in the districts, like in the one by Chicago, they have more. All right, there's usually 3 of them in the kind of there, and then 1 kind of within the kind of the other districts there. All right, so appellate courts kind of serve as this idea, basically, kind of like to kind of remediate, if you will, any decisions that are made at the kind of the circuit or district level. All right, so these are the various 5 districts. I said Chicago's 1. We're down in the 5th district. All right, the appellate court, if you had a case that you wanted to appeal to that, you would go to Mount Vernon. All right, Mount Vernon is the seat of the appellate court. There's like kind of a real, it's an older looking courthouse there, just off of kind of like Jefferson Street there. And my brother used to live in Mount Vernon. He used to pass by there all the time. And then what we see here is Supreme Court is the highest court, and much like in the kind of federal system, they have original jurisdiction in cases of revenue or habeas corpus. But other than that, they serve as the final court of appeal. All right, so let's say you go to the appellate court, all right, and basically your decision is kind of overturned, but then let's say the state's like, we don't agree with that. This case can go all the way to the Supreme Court, like the Illinois State Supreme Court, which, like the General Assembly, where the governor is in Springfield. All right, it's located in Springfield there. So it's essentially, for the most part, it's your final court of appeal on matters, much like kind of like how the Supreme Court serves. All right. So there's some similarities in with that. Essentially, there are 7 state Supreme Court justices. Oh, this is where I got the appellate, the Supreme Court. 3 of them are from the first judicial kind of district, all right, with the Court of Appeal, which is Chicago. And there's 1 from all the other ones. All right. They're elected for a 10-year term. All right. There's no term limits. Okay. And like basically in the Supreme Court, there is a Chief Justice. The Chief Justice, though, is picked amongst the justices. All right. The current Chief Justice right now is a woman named Ann Burke. And then the person that represents our kind of like judicial appellate district is David Overstreet. All right. So I think there may be a question on that as well. All right. Again, some of these questions with the state constitution trying to be a little bit goofy. All right. So the main kind of difference between our judges, our Supreme Court, and the federal Supreme Court is the idea of elections. All right. So this can at times can be a little bit, and we know the kind of judges are supposed to be impartial, right? But a lot of times the judges are elected, they kind of have their biases out there, right? And people kind of pick and choose, elect or not based on these biases. So it's a little bit more overtly political, right, if you will. All right, and then I think there's the Chief Justice, and there's David Overstreet. A lot of law books behind him, so you know what he's talking about. And then the qualifications are the last thing here. Simply, all judges must be citizens, right? You have to be a licensed attorney. Remember, at the federal level, there are no qualifications. All right, you be whatever. But in Illinois, you have to be a licensed attorney. You have to kind of pass a member of the bar. And then you have to be residents of the district, like for your Supreme Court, like in your 5th, 2nd, 3rd district, from which you're elected. All right, basically simple as that. So that is essentially executive and judicial branch. So tomorrow I'm going to give you guys something on kind of budget and concept of voting and stuff like that, just kind of like this little worksheet kind of thing. And then I'll give you guys the review, and then we will talk on Monday. Did you guys get that at home?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. See you guys tomorrow.